Hi, this is Marsha.
And this is Kelly.
We are the Two Ewes of Two Ewes Fiber Adventures. Thanks for stopping by.
You'll hear about knitting, spinning, dyeing, crocheting, and just about anything else we can think of as a way to play with string.
We blog and post show notes at twoewesfiberadventures.com.
And we invite you to join our Two Ewes Fiber Adventures group on Ravelry. I'm 100 Projects.
And I am betterinmotion.
We're both on Instagram and Ravelry, and we look forward to meeting you there.
Enjoy the episode. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning, Marsha. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good.
How's the newest member of your family doing?
Oh, he's doing great. Barry is fitting in pretty well. He's walking up to about a mile now. Mm-hmm. You know, he lags toward the end of a mile, but he's been able to go a mile. The first week, so a week ago, he was at the vet, and he got his thyroid medication lowered.
That's good.
So now he's only on a 0.8, I think it's milligrams pill once a day instead of twice a day. So that's good. And last week he had lost 3 pounds.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So
and that's really not with any diet change. That's just the walking, right?
Yeah. Well, more activity. I was trying to feed him the same amount that he had at the SPCA. What they had told me they were feeding him. I was trying to feed him that same amount. It actually was a little bit less food than normal because he wasn't really eating. Mm-hmm. And, my dogs eat.
Yes.
Even Bailey, she had Nash to contend with. She had a lab to contend with. So she knows you put your nose in the bowl and you eat till it's gone. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if she was like that before we got her, but she learned to be like that at least, having Nash around. And he wouldn't. He would eat a little bit, and then he'd walk out a little bit into the yard, and then he'd pee, and then he'd walk back and he'd eat a little bit more, and then he'd walk over kind of towards Bailey to see if maybe she had something better. And I was like, okay, if you're not going to finish this, I'm going to pick it up because it's going to cause a problem. So he wasn't finishing the whole amount. So then I started feeding him lunch, or I thought, feed him lunch to help keep his metabolism high. And so I was doing that. But he wasn't really eating lunch. He wasn't seeming hungry. Mm-hmm. And so he was getting a little bit less food. But anyway, yeah, he lost 3 pounds. And I don't know how much he's lost since then, but I do think he's lost a little bit. His feet, he looks like he's lost weight in his feet.
Oh, really?
That seems really strange, but that's the only place I can kind of tell they look less puffy. Like his feet were really round, not like a shepherd. Mm-hmm. In fact, the vet said she thinks he's mixed with Tibetan Mastiff.
Okay, that's very specific.
Yes, but I went and looked at their pictures, and he does kind of look like that. They have a tail that kind of arches over their back, and he doesn't have that. Mm-hmm. But they have they call them cat feet in the standard, where their feet are round and tight, and the shepherd's feet are more elongated. Yeah. So anyway. And his feet were round and tight, and they still are, but they're less round. They look less round on top,
Well, I mean, maybe he was retaining water or something.
Maybe
his ankles were swelling, my grandmother, and now with all this activity, things are moving. Maybe, I don't know.
It's hard. It's really hard to tell. And of course, we can't weigh him because you can't pick him up.
Yeah.
And step on the scale with him the way you could with a smaller dog. So, he'll have to wait till he goes to the vet again for us to know for sure. And I'm hoping I can get the vet to let us bring him just for a weight check, because I don't want him to lose weight too fast, and that's part of regulating his thyroid. If he is losing weight too fast, that could be an indicator that his thyroid medication is too high. So. So I'm hoping the vet will, say we can bring him in every 2 weeks or something for just, for free, just let them take him in and weigh him and bring him back out.
Enzo's vet, you could just bring your dog in anytime because they just have the scale out there in the lobby. So you could just go weigh your dog. In fact, that's where I went. Remember the big giant Afghan? I went and weighed it on that scale.
Marsha went to the vet to weigh her Afghan. Very funny.
Yeah, but now with the pandemic, I can't go into the lobby.
It's a little more of a production for them to come out and get him weighed. So, but things are supposed to open here in California on June 15th, and I don't know if that means everything. Like from then on, I actually think that the vets are probably secretly glad that no owners are in the office when they do their vet checks, because dogs are always worse when their owners are around in situations like that. I think. I mean, they're probably. Yeah. I wonder if they'll. Well, I don't know what they'll do, but there's probably been some added convenience to just picking the dog up in the parking lot and taking it in.
Well, and then you don't have all the animals in the lobby too, because that's another thing too, is the altercations in the lobby. So. Yeah. Well, that's exciting news that he's making some progress. Now, the thyroid medication though is not because he's overweight. He will, even if he loses weight, he'll always be on thyroid medication. Correct.
The weight gain is probably due to his thyroid issues. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, some of the weight gain might be other reasons, but some of it, I mean, definitely for a dog to be as overweight as he was, there was a thyroid problem there. That's what the vet said anyway.
And then I'm assuming, given what you know about his history, which is very little, I'm assuming that the thyroid medication started after he went to the SPCA.
Yes. Yeah. They noticed that they stitched him up from his wounds, and then they noticed that he wasn't kind of bouncing back. And he was very lethargic. And then, the vet first thought it was just because of what had happened to him and then being in the shelter. And then she decided, no, he needs to have a blood test. So they did a blood test and his thyroid was extremely low. So he's progressing nicely. He now lays on a pillow. It takes me about 10 times of putting him back before he is convinced that I mean it. And just stays there, or maybe he's just too exhausted. That's how I feel at the end of it, too exhausted.
That you need to go lie down too, right?
But the other day, I even came in and took a nap, and brought them back in with me during the day, and closed up the bedroom and took a nap for about an hour and a half, and he was quiet in the bedroom. So he's got the routine, the normal routine. Plus, he's knows in this location, this is what I do. So that's good. In the backyard, he's been fence fighting with the neighbor dogs, him and Bailey. So that's not good, but we're working on that.
And he and Bailey are doing well together.
Oh yeah, they're having a great time. They've had a couple of little tiffs, little fights, but nothing major. He's learning how to get into the truck. In fact, that's one of the fights they had. He has decided that the truck belongs to him. And if she tried to get, if the doors open of the truck in the backyard and she tries to get too close to it, that's the 2 times they've had fights, has been around the truck. So now I have to really watch when the truck gets opened that, he and that the 2 of them are not real close to the door, because he now thinks that the truck belongs to him and she's not allowed to get near it. He loves his truck, which is good. That's what we wanted, but not quite.
He loves it a bit too much.
Yes, so
possessive it. Okay. Well, it sounds like making lots of good progress.
Yeah, we have been.
And proof that you can teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's fitting right in, learning the routine.
Well, I think the routine is the biggest part of it, just having that, this is what we do every day. Not necessarily always at the same time, but these are the things that we do. And then we've been gradually increasing what those things are. So luckily the weather's been good and we've been able to use a lot of the outdoor space.
All right.
And school's almost over.
Oh, how many days?
I wasn't counting it in days, but I guess I could now because we're in the middle of the second to the last week. Next week is finals week. I'm so glad.
Yay.
This week, though, I'm packed with student appointments for them to go over things and do review and such, mostly out of guilt. Because it's the end of the semester and I haven't been able to do as good a job as I wanted with this online stuff. And so now I'm feeling like, okay, well, I need to make up for that by allowing for all this extra makeup work and all that. So, yeah, the teacher's life. It's never good enough.
I thought of you because the other day, this is maybe 2 weeks ago, Ben had one of his instructors had office hours. There were 3 hours long office hours, and Ben was in the office for 3 hours.
Wow.
But then I guess like all these students were coming in and going out, right? But I thought of you and it's like, that is a long time to be in a meeting, like it's that. And I thought of you when he was talking about this,
Yeah. I think we all
had to go take a nap after that.
Yeah. I think we all do it at the end of the semester. We want to give students all the opportunities that we can to get the material and learn it. And I had such high hopes at the beginning of this semester that, this time I was going to get the online thing. The second time around doing it online, I was going to get it right. And of course, it doesn't feel like I got it right at all. But it was better than last time. I'm trying to have a growth mindset. It was better than the last semester. So I have one class that's a repeat of the class I had last semester, and that class is better. And then this class, the calculus class I had last spring when we were half face-to-face and half online. And I have to say that the online portion of it this spring is better than the online portion that I did last spring. So I have improved and I have high hopes that it will be even better in the fall semester where I'm teaching both of these classes again. So totally growth mindset. I'm going to be better. I haven't mastered it yet, but I will, that kind of thing. But then there's a little bit of aspect of guilt because you haven't done as good a job as you want to do. So
yeah.
But that happens to me every semester, whether we're online or not. It's just a little bit exacerbated in the online environment. I always feel like I could have done better. Well, I tell new teachers, teaching is a black hole that you could pour all of your time in and never be good enough. So you can't be a perfectionist and do this job or you'll burn out, You have to be willing to say, well, that was good enough. And I'll do better next time. Or I'll try. I might not, but I'm going to try. So anyway, I'm just glad the semester's almost over.
Yes, and you'll have the whole summer to look forward to.
And our summer spin-in.
So, summer spin-in, should we get to the knitting and the fibery portion, the playing with string portion of the podcast?
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk about your projects or?
Sure. I am making really good progress. In fact, I'm crocheting on it right now. I'm making really good progress on the Persian tiles blanket, and I'm making it for my grandniece and calling it Faye's flower blanket. I don't have the name in the show notes of the designer, but it's called Persian tile blanket. If anybody wants to go look at it. And then I have it in my projects as Faye's flower blanket, and that will be linked to in the show notes. But I've got all of the octagons done, 20 of them. Which that was exciting when I got that last one done. In fact, I almost made a 21st, not remembering that I was that I had been on 19 and 20 was it. And then I reminded myself. So I moved to finishing the squares, and all the squares are done. And then what I'm crocheting on right now is the last row of the last triangle. So now all I have to do are the 4 corners, which are also triangles, but this is like, it's called a triangle granny square or a granny triangle or something. So I'm on the last row of the last one of these. So then all I'll have are the 4 corners.
And then I'm looking at the projects on Ravelry. Then you have to sew them all together, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And then
I'll be all done except for this big, huge project of sewing them all together.
Sorry to bring that up. But then it looks like it has a border around it too. Then you have to.
Let me look. I have the pattern right here. You know what? I have it.
Oh, by the way, Kelly, there's a border. And
there's an edging. Yeah. Once the pieces are together, you will have uneven blanket edges. To make an even edge, you need to work a round of stitches. So I do 4, 5, 6 rounds of edging. Oh, no wonder I have so much yarn left over. I've been thinking, oh my God, I have so much yarn left over, but it's going to take a lot of yarn to go all the way around that blanket. I might have to buy more.
And you made it a little bit bigger too. You put some more squares on it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, and then also just, I'm sorry to be.
No, this is funny. This is an example of why you should read all the way through your pattern.
But then also what I was going to say is I'm looking at the, I don't know if you're on Ravelry, but I'm looking at the other projects. Some of them have just, with the way you described it, looks like it's a very sort of simple border. But I'm looking at one, and it looks like Kay Vick Knits, and she has like a lace border around it. I mean, an interesting.
Oh wow!
And let's see if she.
I don't think I will do that.
Nothing in the notes, but yeah, all the way around it, it's got like triangles all the way around it. It looks like.
Oh, interesting. Oh, yeah. I see. Yeah.
So.
Oh, that is pretty.
Yeah. So if you really want to use up your all of that yarn,
I actually, now that I'm looking at the border, I might have to buy more yarn, but we'll see. I have an awful lot of it left. I think I will just do the plain border though, on the edge. We'll see. I don't know. Getting it all sewn together is going to take a while.
Yeah.
And the version that I'm doing will look more like the Eastern Jewels version. Mm-hmm. There was a kit apparently for this. There was the regular Persian tile blanket where it's all the same. Every octagon is the same. And then there was an Eastern Jewels version that had all the octagons different, and it looks like it's all different sizes of flowers. And that's the look I'm going for. Mm-hmm. And I think I've accomplished that.
Okay, Kelly.
Yes.
Go look on the projects. Go look at By the Seashore, her project. And she has a very interesting border on hers. And in the show notes, it actually said that she did the zigzag edging from Lilla Bjorn Crochet.
Oh,
that's cute.
So that is cute. She did. So there's a stitch in the octagons and in the triangles where you make a crisscross of treble crochets. Mm-hmm. And it looks like that's a crisscross. She's used that crisscross of treble crochets all around the edge. Mm-hmm. That is nice.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to favorite her project because people who are listening, if you have not discovered this, if you save a project in your favorites, then on your project page, it will show those favorites in the lower, on the computer, it's in the lower right-hand corner. So anything that I like the comments on or that I'm interested in, I favorite that project, and then that makes it pop up in my project page where I can take a look at it. Okay. It's a nice feature because I've in the past had to kind of like, make a list of links of the ones that I wanted. And then I realized, if I just favorite them, they show up at the bottom of my project page and I can get to them easily. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm really happy with it. I think it's turned out really nice. I am not looking forward to sewing it together, but I am looking forward to seeing it kind of come together. I've laid it out on the table, and I really like the way it looks.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it's really nice. It's like a riot of color.
Yeah. Well, it's
and I know there are people who say a riot is ugly, no matter what kind of riot it is.
Well, I think it's such an interesting project because, as you say, it is a riot of color. But everyone's done such different things where it's like you're doing it. It's like, a riot of color. And then there's other ones that I think are equally beautiful, but they're very different, where they make every square or whatever the main one is exactly the same. And those are, so it's very geometric, and those are beautiful too.
Sort of Islamic looking, or Moroccan looking.
Yeah, like
Persian. It's called Persian tiles, so
right? And so the one I'm looking at right now is Kororo knits, Persian, and she's done every one exactly the same, and it's very pretty. It's very geometric, just a completely different look,
Mm-hmm. It actually kind of reminds me of Mexican tiles.
Yeah,
the Mexican tiles that some people have on their houses, or on their steps.
Something to think about your edging.
Yeah, I'll have to. I'm going to have to reorganize the yarn and see what I have left and see what I can still do. Yeah. So anyway, that's one project. And then I did make a couple of charity hats, a couple of nights where I didn't feel like crocheting. So I used I have fingering weight yarns that I've kind of put together in a little kit to use doubled for charity hats. So I just worked on those, mostly purples and pinks. And then the other thing is just I'm getting ready to start the socks out of the Bear brand Caprice yarn. And I wanted to mention, speaking of that yarn, we talked about that Bear brand Caprice vintage yarn a few episodes ago. And it's, just to remind you, that's the one that it says it's 100% virgin wool, but it really feels elasticy, like it's got some kind of elastic in it. And it looks like there might be an elastic ply. If you look really closely, there's a really thin ply that looks like it might be elastic. So I think when they say, I don't know if it doesn't say 100%, it might say all virgin wool. I think they're referring to all the wool that's in it is not recycled, but it doesn't say on the label that the yarn is all wool. But anyway, we talked about this in a previous episode, how interesting this yarn is, and I am going to make a pair of socks out of it. I've ripped out the last pair, and I'm going to restart them maybe today. I have a meeting this afternoon, and it might be good meeting knitting because I'll be done with my crocheting, most of it. I got a message from Jane Haskell about our conversation of the Bear brand yarn. She says, I heard you mention Bear brand. Attached are copies of covers of 2 books. One has many socks, including Argyle, circa 1950. And then she has in parentheses, or MCML, because that's the way it was listed in Roman numerals in the book. If you can read Roman numerals. The other is circa 1939. Both were my grandmother's and have her notes in them. I have many more vintage books of my 2 grandmothers and 2 grand aunts, and possibly 1 great grandmother's that I am yard sailing this summer. I would like to go to her yard sale. I do not have any Bear brand yarn from stash that I inherited, or if I do, I've already sold or Goodwilled it. I copied the inside of the cover of the 1939 book so you can see what it says, and she sent me that copy. There are other pages about blocking, measuring, showing illustrations of measurements, and darling little swim costumes, and so on. So she says she loves the show and listens while she's driving. She lives on an island an island in Maine's Penobscot Bay.
Okay.
Where there is a knitting retreat this summer sponsored by Portland's Maine Yarn. So thank you, Jane, for sending that information. The copies that she sent me were really interesting to look at about this yarn, and I'm gonna print it out and stick the page inside of the bag that I have the yarn in, so I won't forget. What kind of yarn it is and where it came from. So I thought that was interesting to get some information about my vintage yarn.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Well, maybe we have to get on a plane and go to her yard sale. It sounds like
I know, really. go and buy old knitting books. I just got rid of a whole bunch.
I know. I just got rid of a whole bunch
years ago. So,
but that doesn't stop me from dreaming.
I know. I know. It's so interesting to look through those through those old fashioned books. And that's the end of my projects.
Wow. I don't have a lot to report. I'm knitting on my sock, right now as we're talking, the Drops Fabel Print that I've been working on for a really long time. And I'm working on the gusset. I have one more decrease round, and then I'm just going to be doing the foot. So I don't know, maybe in 2 weeks I'll have finished it. I don't know. It's sort of my, the mindless knitting that I do.
Yeah.
My walk along tee, in all the past episodes I've been talking about, I'm a little anxious about quantity of yarn, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, last night I've knit about 11 and I think it was about 11 and a half inches of the body, which they say to knit. And then what you are supposed to do is then you bind off, but then pick up stitches in the contrasting color to make it so it looks like, there's a t-shirt under a t-shirt, which I'm not going to do. But if you do that, it's more of a tunic length, and I don't want a tunic length. So I decided last night to put it on waste yarn and try it on. And I think I'm at the length I want. So this is my, I then have to do about a half inch of ribbing. And then what you're supposed to do then is, as I said, you bind that off and then pick up stitches to knit in stockinette in the contrasting color. What you do on the neck edge and the sleeves, the cuff of the sleeve, is you knit in ribbing, and then you change to the contrasting color, and you just do, I believe it would be reverse stockinette. So then that contrasting color sort of curls back and makes like a tube kind of, And so I have to make some decisions. Do I put that same detail around the bottom of the sweater? Now, I know a lot of people are saying, well, you don't really want to have a line around the widest part of your hip. I'm not too concerned about that. That never really bothers me, having stripes but I'm so I have to decide if I'm going to do that. I'm also trying to decide, should I just finish the sweater now, the bottom, or should I just leave it on the waste yarn and go and do the sleeves and finish the sleeves and then think about the bottom? That'll give me more weeks to think about it, or do you know what I'm saying?
That's what I would do. Okay. Yeah, that's what I would do.
And then what I had planned on doing with the sweater is to make 3/4 length sleeves. I may have enough yarn for that because I have just 2 balls left. I mean, so it's basically roughly a little less than 1 skein left because as I've talked about endlessly, the skeins I split into half into 2 cakes. So one of the cakes I've used maybe 1/4 of it. The other cake I just maybe did 2 rows of the body with the second one. So I think between the 2 of them, I would have enough to do 3/4 length sleeves. But now I'm beginning to think I don't want 3/4 length sleeves. I think I just want short sleeves, not cap sleeves, but just come down like mid, because 3/4 length would come down,
like past your elbow?
Past my elbow. I don't know. So I have to.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah.
That's what I think of.
That's what I think too. And so I'm thinking maybe I just want it to come down, maybe longer. Like this, the pattern shows that you just knit a few rows and then you start all of the ribbing and the contrasting reverse stockinette. So it's more, it's like a short sleeve. I'm wondering if I want to have it come down just right before the break in my arm, kind of, or above that.
Yeah.
I have to do some thinking.
It's best not to have like they say, you don't want to stop something at the widest part. Mm-hmm. So it's best like not to have your sleeve stop at the biggest part of your bicep.
Oh, okay.
So to either be up a little higher or down a little lower.
Okay. Why is that?
I like mine. I don't know. I guess it has to do with, like to look flattering, you know. And I have no idea if it makes it look smaller or if it just makes it look more balanced. You know, I don't know if it has to do with when you say flattering. A lot of times, flattering is a euphemism for skinnier.
Yeah.
Right? That makes you look thin.
Right.
And that's not what I mean.
Right.
So I don't know if that rule applies because it does make you look thinner and that's what they mean by more flattering, or if it actually has to do like with the aesthetics of it and kind of the balance of the garment.
Do you remember the t-shirt you made? I think it was the Havasu Falls. And don't the sleeves
I didn't make that one.
I mean, what's the one?
Havana.
Oh.
I made one called Havana. Is it brown?
No, the one that was like, and maybe it is brown. The pattern,
Summer Fjord?
Summer Fjord, I think, is the one. What color is Summer Fjord?
That's the one you made. That's my gold one.
No. Okay, I'm wrong on that. Hang on. So this is where we have the bad podcasting, where we go down these rabbit holes and we're not prepared. Let me look at your projects. Oh no, that's.
I'm guessing it's probably Havana.
I think it is Havana.
It's a kind of a pale brown.
Yes,
pale brown one.
Oh, but you made that quite a while. I'm having to scroll down through all of these. All of your projects. Oh yeah, Havana. Yes, that one. Okay, so let me look at that one. Let me look. Oh yeah, so those sleeves hit you right above the elbow, kind of. You know, they're a little bit. They're not cap sleeves, but they're not 3/4 length.
Right. Yeah, they're. I put them. I made those end at the elbow. Yeah. Like right above my elbow.
Do you think that's a flatter? It looks. I'm looking at the picture.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay.
I like those sleeves a lot.
Okay.
I like that sweater a lot. I think it's a really flattering sweater.
Okay, so then my question is, honey...
And by flattering, I don't mean it makes me look skinny.
Okay, so now I'm looking at Honey of a Tea, and you have 3/4 length sleeves. Are you happy with that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, you're no help because you like both of them. So. It depends upon...
I like those because I think of that as a warmer sweater. Mm-hmm. I don't, even though it's made out of cotton, I don't think of wearing that sweater when it's warm out the way I do the Havana one. I wear when it's warmer out. I actually think, just looking at the pictures, I think the Havana sleeves look better. Mm-hmm.
So then this is my the question I have too then in my mind about this is a merino wool t-shirt. So am I going to wear it in the summer? That's why I think I want a little bit longer sleeve than what they're showing in the picture. But I don't know. I don't want full length, I've decided. But I'm thinking maybe that's why I was thinking originally 3/4 length sleeves, because it is a wool sweater. I don't know that I'd be wearing it in the summer. But
I think probably if I had made the sleeves on, this is the lavender honey is the pattern. I think if I had made the sleeves on that a little bit shorter, it would look a little bit less like my sleeves are just too short.
Oh.
I like this sweater a lot, and I wear it a lot. But it does, looking at the picture, it does look like maybe my sleeves are just a little too short. More than that I purposely made them that length.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think it's ugly. I like it. But but it does look like an odd length, I think.
Okay, well that helps.
If you made these the longer sleeves, I would say have them stop right after your elbow.
Okay.
Whereas mine go like halfway between my elbow and my wrist.
Yeah, and that's the thing with 3/4 length sleeves too, is you have to find that length that where it looks finished and not like I ran out of.
Yes. Yeah, that is kind of the danger. Mm-hmm. You want it to look like it was on purpose.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm making progress on that. And then the other thing I've been working on is spinning. And so yesterday we had a beautiful day, and I had been painting at the other house, but I came home and I sat on my deck. Yay! And I've got my pots planted, and I've got the umbrellas out there, and so it's nice. A very different experience than a year ago at this time, where it was a dust pit back there and no deck. But anyway, I'm working on spinning, so I'm almost done. I think the last time we recorded, I had ordered more fiber of the bitter chocolate, the dark brown, and I have that. I have not opened the package yet. I have probably another just 12 inches of the brown roving to spin, and a little bit of the green. So my plan is to apply that last of that green with the 3-ply as a 3-ply with the brown. Then all the brown that's left over, I'm just going to do a 3-ply of the solid brown. But I haven't finished plying the green and brown together yet. So I still have that to do. But I'm making progress,
Yeah. That's a big, it's a big spinning project to make a sweater.
Yeah, it is. And I have not had, and honestly, I've just not had a lot of time to spin, or the time that I've had to spin, I've been so tired that I just get into bed, and you can't spin in bed. I've discovered.
Right. Right.
Anyway, so that's it for me for projects. I think it's a nice lead in to talking about spinning, a nice lead in to a question that we had from a listener.
So yeah, one of the questions that I've had was about knitting with handspun. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about, what has been our experience knitting with handspun, and some things that especially new spinners can think about or use as tips or tricks or strategies or whatever. So one of the things that I kind of don't like to see is when people talk about how much handspun they have and that they've never knit with it. Like, oh my gosh, you have to. You have to knit with your handspun. Now, if you would have asked me that when I first started spinning, I had no desire to knit with my handspun. I just wanted to make yarn. And then, of course, the knitting and the weaving were partly self-defense against all the yarn I was making. My main goal was to make yarn, but it is really satisfying to make something out of your own yarn, I think. I always really enjoy it. So one of the things I just wanted to mention is how I select a needle size to swatch. And I learned this a long time ago. And I usually do this as a way to kind of identify what needle I'm going to start with. I get out my needle gauge and I double up the yarn and I poke it through the holes in the needle gauge. And I look for one where it goes through pretty easily. It isn't like scraping the edge the whole time. It's not so big that, it doesn't touch at all. But just where does the yarn doubled fit through the needle gauge the best? And that's where I start. And then I usually swatch one needle size down from that and one needle size up from that. And then I look at my fabric. And then if I think, oh, maybe I want to try a little bit looser or a little bit tighter, I'll go even further up or even further down. But usually one up and one down gives me 3 choices. And one of those 3 choices is a fabric that I like. Yes. And a gauge that I like. And then I'll go look in Ravelry and use the gauge as one of the filters in the advanced pattern search. I think I've talked about that before, how I use that in the advanced pattern search. So,
And this is my comment too. This is just about doing swatches. And this is not about handspun. This was all swatches. And people probably know this, but I had not known this. And I think my friend Kim told me this, is that when you do your swatch, like if you're going to do 3 different, I don't make 3 individual swatches. I just do, I make it all one. I just change the needles. But to keep track of which swatch is which size needle, you put holes in there for the size needles. So if you're knitting on size 3s needles, you put 3 yarn overs, knit 2 and then knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together. So you get 3 holes. So then when you look at and right at the beginning of the swatch, so then when you wash it, you know which one is which.
Yeah.
So 5 yarn overs for if you're using size 5 needles, etc. Do you do that?
Yes. The only time that I haven't done that has been when my needle size is so big that I don't have enough stitches on my swatch. And instead of making a bigger swatch, a wider swatch, I have just used a different technique. Like, make a little note or tie a little string on it with the right number of knots or something like that. So, but I do use that technique a lot. You have to make sure that you swatch long enough if you do that, because if you make little, 4-row swatches and one of your rows is holes, that's not going to give you a very good idea.
Yeah.
But I like to make a good size swatch, and then I always wash the swatch too, just to see what that does see what the fabric looks like. So and then I just select a pattern based on those patterns that match my gauge, because I don't like the game of trying to get gauge. I'd rather get a fabric I like and then find a sweater that uses that gauge than try to get a gauge that my yarn is not going to want to do.
Well, and then also select a pattern that beyond gauge, but a pattern that will work with the type of fabric that you've created, or what type of, because even with handspuns, but even commercially made yarns, some work in lace, some don't.
Yeah.
Some work with cables, some don't. Some some work with texture, some don't. So, and that's why another reason to make kind of a large swatch too is that you get a better sense of what it's going to look like if you were to do cables or
like a really textured yarn. Don't bother with a really detailed pattern like cables or that's sort of what happened with those socks, right? It wasn't handspun, but I was trying to use the matcha pattern that had some texture to it with a yarn that already had texture, and it was pointless.
Yeah.
So you do have to be aware of that. So, but we've had a lot of people make things out of their very first handspun in the summer spin-ins that we've had in previous years. So, so I think we do have a good track record of helping people and supporting people, and the group of people who are chatting in the thread also giving a good amount of support to people who want to make something out of their handspun.
Yeah.
It's always fun to see that happen.
Yeah.
So, now you've knit with your handspun. I mean, you're not a new spinner, but you knit with your handspun right away.
Well, my very first one that I made, I think it's still in a ball. And then I'm like, I'm going to spin some yarn. I'm going to make a hat for Ben. That thing is like, it feels like it weighs a pound. I should weigh it. It feels like it weighs a pound. Super dense, super heavy. But I will never throw it away because it's just, and then I so this kind of leads into another thing we were just going to mention. But anyway, I decided I was going to make him a pair of socks and out of my handspun. And I was trying to spin fingering weight or sock weight, it's worsted weight. And so these are very heavy socks, and they're, and I got you wouldn't think that I would get the stitch count off, given that they were so big. There wouldn't be that many stitches for a worse weight pair of socks, but one of them I got this, I don't know how I did it, but I have too many stitches, so one is significantly larger than the other one. So, but I still have those. But I was going to, but just a side note about our comments about the yarn isn't good enough and the allure of spinning thin. And one of the things, like, I talk about that a lot. I don't seem to be able to spin, to date, I have not been able to spin yarn that's finer than DK, perhaps. It always ends up being worsted weight.
Well, and you always make a 3-ply.
Right.
I mean, that you could make it, you could have a fingering weight yarn if you use the singles at this point.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
Or maybe then, with a 2-ply.
Yeah. But then I've made 2 sweaters with my, is that right? Did I make 2 sweaters? Because I did the, I can't even remember.
Combo spins.
Terrible.
You made 2 combo
I did the
spins.
combo spins and I made 2. And I really, I have to say, I just really like knitting with the hand spun. It's a different experience knitting with hand spun because I'm a newer spinner than you are. And that the first combo spin, I think, was the first time I had spun a sweater quantity of yarn. And so because it is hand spun, there is variation. But that's actually kind of fun to knit with, to see. I found it enjoyable. It just, it felt really good to knit with my hand spun. And I don't know how it's because of the irregularities, it's just much more textural. But when
it has
you
more
actually
life,
knit,
there's some element of life to it that
it has a bit more soul to it. Let's put it that way. It has soul.
And also, I mean, it has a little bit more spring to it too. I mean, really, literally has more spring in it, I think, than a commercial yarn. It's more elastic. I mean, it depends on what you're spinning, but for the most part, I think my hand spun is much more elastic than any commercial yarn.
Yeah. Yeah, I just it was very enjoyable to knit with.
Your first project wasn't a sweater, but I know of people whose first project has been a sweater. And I'm not going to stop anyone from jumping in feet first like that. But I think some good first projects are like what you mentioned. A hat is a good first project. I made pot holders out of the really ropey, heavy, dense yarn that I made originally. I made pot holders. I made a little bag for my spinning wheel oil. And the pot holders I felted, so they were really nice and thick. So those are some good first projects. But a hat is a good project. A cowl is a good project. Socks, I think, probably better. It was one of my first projects was socks too. And they were super dense. In fact, I could barely knit 2 together because the yarn was so thick and my needles were so small, and I had an impression of how thin the yarn was when it really wasn't,
And that was my experience with the socks that I made for Ben. Is it was so dense that it's very difficult to my hands hurt at knitting with it, because knitting 2 together for the decreases was really, really challenging.
Yeah, so probably you were using needles more along the lines of sock needles, using a yarn that was closer to worsted weight. Yeah. And so slipper socks would be a better choice. A worsted weight pair of slipper socks would be a better choice probably than just for ease of knitting. But yeah, there are a lot of good projects for hand spun. And this idea that your yarn isn't good enough. I mean, a lot of people will say that, I want to get better before I use my yarn. I would say your yarn is good enough. It's a matter of the right, finding the right project for it. And it's only the super, super early yarn that is so dense and ropey. I mean, people quickly, I think, move from that sort of ropey plying, really dense plying. That happens pretty quickly in spinning.
Well, in that ropey hat that I made, you can see, when you're plying and you get those little corkscrews that you can't undo, and lots of that knitting, and you can so many that you can actually see it in the finished project, but you have to start somewhere.
That's right. That's right.
But I have to say, with the 2 sweaters that I made, as I say, the yarn is has character, thick and thin bits.
And the sweaters are beautiful. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think they're really nice. But what I was going to say is that, and we've talked about this before, but you have thick and thin bits in the single, but then when you ply it, that changes. But you still may, even if you still have thick and thin bits after you ply it, that all changes again when you knit it up.
Yeah.
And so those thick and thin parts really begin to sort of just disappear, I think. And worst case scenario, if you have one that's just one spot that's super, super thin or super, super thick, you cut it out and just splice the yarn together and keep knitting.
Yeah. If you have a bad spot, or if you have one of those pigtails from plying that you don't want to be in your...
Oh, that's what it's called, a pigtail?
That's what I call it. I don't know if it's... Oh, okay. If that's what... I don't know if that's what it's called or not, but that's kind of what I call it.
That's a good name. That's a good... Yeah. So, but then Kelly, how about measuring the skein?
Oh, yeah. That's the other thing that happens when you're new, is you have a misperception about how much yarn you made. And there does seem to be, not so much anymore. There used to be a lot of I don't know, the social media kind of pressure about spinning that I didn't have because there wasn't social media when I started spinning. I didn't know what other people's spinning looked like, other than when I went to guild meetings and saw it on, saw what they were working on. But I didn't do that that often. And Spin-Off had episodes. They had issues where they started to, after I'd been spinning quite a while, they started having issues where you would send your skein to them and they would photograph it and they would put the skeins in the magazine, the photographs. And that was the first time that I really had a ton of exposure to other people's yarn. And that wasn't even, real life exposure, but picture exposure. So I didn't have, the pictures that people will post. And I'm not criticizing people for doing this, but I think the way people perceive it is different. Like, people will post pictures and they'll put a coin along with their yarn, right? And the idea is to give you some element of scale. You can tell how thick or thin the yarn is. But sometimes I think when I see, some of these pictures are, especially, it used to be more common. I would see these pictures, or I would hear people talking about how thin their yarn was. And it was like, that was the only thing that was valuable, was the thin yarn. Like, if it wasn't thin, it was not worth spinning or doing anything with. And you had to try to get it as thin as possible. Well, there's a use for thin yarn, but I don't knit with lace weight all the time.
Right.
So like, what are you going to do with, dozens of skeins of lace weight and thinner? So make the yarn that's going to fit what you're going to make. And so if you like knitting with DK weight yarn, then that's the weight that you should try to spin for. If you like fingering weight yarn, then you can try to spin for fingering weight, and that'll mean your plies are a little thinner. But experiment, with thick yarn and thin yarn, and there's nothing inherently better about spinning thin, I guess, is my point. And then the other thing that's also true is the worsted yarn. A lot of times I'll see at a spinning event that, people are spinning like this, they call it inchworm style. And again, there is nothing wrong with spinning in that way. It makes a very smooth, compressed yarn because you're only letting a little bit of fiber out and then you're smoothing it down before you advance it. And so it makes a very smooth and also very compressed yarn, which is fine if you're wanting worsted style yarn, right? That's what worsted style is, very smooth and compressed. But if you want something fluffy or light, then, use a different spinning style and you'll have fluffier yarn or it'll have a halo to it. And there's something nice about the fact when you wash it, it gets a little bit fuzzy, more fuzzy. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I would suggest if you're a new spinner, just spin and see what happens. I mean, it's good to have goals and it's good to try things like to give yourself a lesson or a challenge, for learning. But when you're first spinning, I think just spin and see what happens. And some fibers are going to want to be more smooth and other fibers are going to turn into a yarn that's really fluffy. And sometimes you're going to get a yarn that's thick and sometimes you're going to get a yarn that's thinner depending on the fiber that you're using. And that's how, and then you can kind of learn what they say, like what the fiber wants to be. And then don't try to make fiber be what it doesn't want to be.
Right.
So anyway, I think that's kind of an important thing to keep in mind.
But we started this about measuring the yardage. And so, Kelly, do you want to talk about how you measure it?
Yeah,
you taught me how to measure.
How did I get from, because you said that already, measuring the yardage. How did I get off topic?
I know. I'm trying to guide you back on topic.
Thank you.
Graciously, but I don't think I did it very graciously. But
no, that was nice, Marsha. Thank you. So, measuring the yardage, be careful when you measure on the niddy noddy because it's going to be stretched. So like I have what's called a 1 yard niddy noddy, and it's not actually 1 yard. Like if I measure a piece of yarn that goes around, even if I use like cotton string that doesn't stretch at all, and I go around or if I take the tape measure and go around my niddy noddy, it's not quite a yard. It's a little short of a yard, even though it was advertised as a 1 yard niddy noddy. And then if I wind the yarn onto it, of course it's tight. So just counting how many times, actually it's a 2 yard, it's a 2 yard niddy noddy. So just counting the number of times I went around doesn't really give me the yardage that I have. I made that mistake before, thinking I had way more yarn than I actually had.
Yeah.
So now what I do is after I've washed it, skeined it up and washed it, I just lay it out kind of flat on the ironing board or on the table. And then I just measure how long that skein is, kind of on average. Like I put the tape measure kind of in the middle of each end and measure. And then I just, and I count how many
now
threads there are.
Oh, go ahead. Now you do that though after you've washed the yarn.
Yeah. I do it after I've washed it and I don't count it while I wind it on because I can't do that. I could count and say, I went around, 300 times as I'm winding it on. I don't usually do that. I usually count them after it's been washed, just because I know I'm not going to keep track when I'm winding.
Okay. Well, do you want to know what I do?
What do you do?
So, because you gave me your extra niddy noddy. And so I think we have the same one. It's the 2 yard one. In theory, what I do is I do count as I wrap around the niddy noddy. I count up to 20 and then make a mark on a piece of paper.
Oh, you're much more disciplined than I am.
And then because I could not count 300, I would lose track, right? But if I just count and if I'm really distracted, I just count to 10. But I count around 20 times, mark it on a piece of paper, 20 times, mark it. So then it ends up being, say, I have I've wrapped it around 80 times. It usually ends up being an odd number, 87 times.
Right.
Then what I do is I multiply that by 2. And then I measured the length. I take it off the knitting knot, and I don't stretch it really tight, but I just hold it straight out, and I measure it. Usually it ends up being 30 inches.
Yeah, mine's somewhere around there.
So what I end up doing but I haven't washed it yet though. So what I do is I then my math is, the number of times I've wrapped around, say it's 87 times, times the length, which is 30 inches, then doubled times 2. Then I divide it by 36.
Right.
And that tells me how many yards I have.
Yeah.
Approximately. Now, I have not, so the yarn that I'm working on now, then I put a tag on it. What the fiber is, how many yards approximately I think I have based on that. Then I weigh it to figure out how many ounces I have. You could also do grams too, but how many ounces that skein is. And then in the lower right-hand corner of the tag, I put a 1 and then a slash. Like if you're going to do a percent, a 1 slash. And then when I'm all done, so you'll have a skein 1, skein 2, skein 3. And then when I'm all done, I fill in how many skeins I have. So it's 1 of 10, 2 of 10, 3 of 10. Don't ask me why I do that. just because it might be kind of weird, but then I know what was my first skein and what was my last skein. And I was thinking the reason you can ask me why I do that, because I do have a reason why I do that.
Why do you do that, Marsha?
So that my theory is when I start, say I'm going to knit a sweater, then I can knit with my first and my last skein. Maybe alternate my first and last skein. And so that because there is going to be variation, I would think, because you are for example, this green and brown that I'm spinning, it's over a period of months that I'm spinning it. And sometimes I take a week or 2 weeks break that I'm not doing anything. So there's going to be variation between the first skein and the last skein just because weeks, months, or years have gone past, right? So that's sort of my idea is, well, if I then can blend them and keep track of those skeins, I can blend them as I'm knitting, alternate those skeins.
That makes sense because I think you would, especially if you were a newer spinner, it might get finer as you go, even if you're trying to keep it consistent, and even if you have a control card, or a piece of yarn that you're using to spin to. It's very likely that you are going to get your spinning is going to improve, and a lot of people, when their spinning improves, they do end up, they have more facility with drafting, and they do end up with a thinner yarn.
Yeah, and then the other thing I do is so with that first skein, so I know I have, say, 150 yards, and it weighs 2 ounces. I don't know that, but so then I can figure out, well, how many yards am I getting per ounce?
Yeah.
And so, I'm starting with this many ounces of fiber. It gives me a little bit, so it's not accurate because it's only my first skein, but it gives me kind of a sense of well, how much yarn do I think how much yardage am I going to produce out of so many ounces of yarn? And then I add in skein 2, skein 3, and it's to see. And it's pretty accurate from that first skein, even as I started adding and doing the math to see how many ounces, or excuse me, let me rephrase that, how many yards per ounce I'm going to get. It stays pretty consistent as I start adding in the skeins.
Yeah.
Does that make sense what I do?
And then that gives you an idea, will you have enough fiber? Or do you, like in this particular sweater, quantity that you're spinning right now, you decided you needed to buy more fiber because you knew you weren't going to get the yardage that you were hoping for. Yeah. No, I think that's really good. I think those are kind of our main thoughts about knitting with your handspun or crocheting, doing any kind of working with your handspun. Like, how do you find them?
Or weaving?
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about weaving.
Weaving is a great thing to do with your handspun because textured yarn makes really nice weaving projects. And you don't need to worry about gauge so much.
What are good projects for textured yarn in knitting or crochet, do you think?
I think like the the slipper socks is a good one because they'll be nice and squishy, and I think a nice cowl would be good in a textured yarn. For knitting or crocheting.
What about people who are more advanced and you start doing sort of like those what's the right word? Like art yarns, like they actually spin in. That's what I was thinking of, like when you spin in, you intentionally spin.
Right, like thick and thin.
Exaggerated.
Slubs.
Yeah.
I've seen some really pretty sweaters with the slubby yarn. You use kind of a loose gauge, and that way the real slubby parts can show up. Well, like my Sunny Bono jacket is at a really loose gauge, and that yarn is definitely art yarn. You have all those locks sticking off the yarn. So I do think a looser gauge is best for those kinds of yarns, and you could use them as, I've seen people use them as like the brim of a hat, and then the rest of the hat is like the part you fold up, or like a cuff, on a sleeve, or a yoke, like a stripe in the yoke. So you could use your handspun along with something else, and that's a really nice way to use up just one skein, one small skein of handspun. In a project that's not a handspun, not fully a handspun project.
Do you have anything more you want to add on this topic?
I don't think so today. I think that's good. And then we'll add other topics. And we're interested in knowing, I put a question in the Summer Spin In chat thread to let us know if there's anything that you would want to hear about during the Spin In. The topics that you'd like us to talk about in spinning on the podcast, you can do that. You can send us an email. You can contact us through our website, Two Ewes Fiber Adventures.com. We have a contact us page. You can contact us there. You can contact either me or Marsha on Instagram through a direct message, and we can add your question to our topic list.
And we'll talk more. Hopefully, we'll get a lot of good questions, and we'll add some. We'll talk about spinning over the next few months, because just a reminder, the summer spin-in starts. It's Memorial Day through Labor Day, which is May 31st through September 6th.
Yeah,
and so we'll be talking more about spinning over the summer months.
Yeah, a good 3 months, a little more than 3 months of spinning.
By September, people will be saying, please stop talking about spinning. You've spun us dry. Anyway.
All right.
So I'm excited about this.
Yeah, me too.
I've got projects planned. So anyway. So Kelly, do we have anything else we wanted to say? Any more?
I don't think so.
Should we say goodbye?
Yeah.
I don't mean to.
Yes, let's say goodbye. We'll see everyone we'll talk to everyone in 2 weeks.
Alrighty, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening. To subscribe to the podcast, visit twoewesfiberadventures.com.
Join us on our adventures on Ravelry and Instagram. I am betterinmotion, and Kelly is 100 Projects.
Until next time, we're the Two Ewes
doing our part for World Fleece.